What's happening, everyone? My name is James Lynch, and this is the Fanatics View Hockey Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you guys have any questions, post them in the chat. I'll get to every single one of them. All you got to do is subscribe to the channel and get your questions read on air. Appreciate you guys joining me. Sorry I was off last week. I think I mentioned it the week before, but I did a backpacking trip for like 5 days on Vancouver Island. It was really cool. It was quite the grind, but it's totally worth it if you ever get the chance to do it. It's called the West Coast Trail, so I got to do that last week. So I was away, didn't have any reception, wasn't able to do the stream there, but we're back this week. There's lots of stuff going on in the NHL right now. A little bit later on the show, we're going to be joined by one of our favorites on here, Steven Ellis of Daily Faceoff, to talk about the Maple Leafs offseason. One of the big rumors right now is that the Leafs are interested in reacquiring Nazim Kadri, so I want to get some insight on that. Of course, I can get Steven's reaction to the Mitch Marner trade, which we discussed with Troy, I think, a couple weeks ago. And we'll talk about some other news that's going on. There are still a few free agents on the docket right now. But let's first, before we dive into everything else, have a quick look on the Fanatics channel and show you guys some of the content we got up here. What do we got? Yeah, so let's have a quick look at that, and then we'll go through some of the news as well. There's lots of stuff to get into. So if we look at it right now, lots of stuff here for the offseason. So we'll start first with Nate Schmidt. So obviously a big move for him, leaving Florida, going over to Utah, signing that contract there. Really good stuff. And the beauty thing about what we do here on Fanatics View is that, you get the full scrum, right? Like, if you're watching like a sports broadcast or something, you're maybe getting like 30 seconds, or you have to go to the team's website to find the media scrum or the interview. We got everything for you here with multiple teams. So you look at their Nate Schmidt there, Ryan Reeves. That's another thing we can talk to Steven about, being traded from the Toronto Maple Leafs to the San Jose Sharks. So getting his thoughts on that. We got Nick Hague, traded from Vegas to Nashville. His thoughts over there. Dmitry Orlov signing with the Sharks. Sharks making a lot of moves this offseason. We'll see if those end up paying off. Still don't think they're a playoff team, but nonetheless, some big moves there. Jake Allen signing a long-term contract with the Devils at a very nice cap hit of, I think, like 1.5. Cody Glass signing with the Devils. You got all the Florida Panthers stuff as well. Of course, they were able to keep most of their team together, which was super impressive. And added a bit. I mentioned Nate Schmidt going to Utah. Hey, Jeff Petrie, come on down. That's what Florida does very well, is they're able to get these veteran defensemen that maybe at one point were sort of really notable and getting them on a really good contract here. So Florida, again, doing great work. They're going to be one of the favorites again to win the Cup this year, just with the fact they were able to keep the band back together. Also got to check out our guys, the Texas Hockey Podcast. We had Travis Tyler on the show last 2 weeks ago, I should say, talking about the Dallas Stars offseason and obviously their new head coaching change. So if you guys missed that episode, you can go watch it there. But lots of stuff going on in the offseason. I like this, time of year almost as much as the regular season, because I love the trades and I love all the chatter. Of course, we're getting a lot of lists coming out right now. I think NHL put out their like top 25 lists. Actually, let me find that because there was some interesting debate as to where certain players should be listed. NHL top 25 players. I think we got the list here. Yeah, I think there was a list here recently, but we'll have to go look at that. Or was it the ratings reveal? I forget. We'll have to kind of look up and see what's going on there. But lots of stuff going on. Again, if you guys got any questions, let me know in the chat. Happy to get those answers for you. Let's look at some news here as we're waiting for Steven to hop on. One big news that's not NHL related, but Gavin McKenna, we haven't talked about that. The projected 2026 first overall pick is signed with Penn State and getting a pretty hefty contract out of that. You don't usually see that with college kids, but getting almost a league minimum contract for the NHL, getting I think $700K with his deal. So that was some of the news that happened since we were last off here. What else do we have as far as other things that are going on with the NHL right now? There was a list here. I'm trying to remember what that list is. I can't find it right now. Anyways, we'll kind of keep rambling here as well. But let's look at some of the we'll look at the NHL free agency tracker. And if there's any names that kind of, catch our eye a little bit here, we can discuss those. So we've got, actually, you know what? We'll just go with this. We'll look at some of the additions that happened in the offseason, kind of go through that and kind of give my thoughts here. So going team by team here, Anaheim Ducks, Granlund signing the 3-year deal. That was sort of one of the big ones. I know the Canucks were in on Mikael Granlund, but ultimately decided to go over to Anaheim, take the $7 million a season, of course, leaving Dallas. So that's a bit of a hole there for Dallas, but yeah, big move there. Some of the other moves this offseason, Tanner Jeannot signing with Boston. A lot of people don't like that contract. I think he was overpaid a little bit. Buffalo doing a number of moves. Oh, Bowen Byram. That was some news that happened last week. So a lot of talk that Bowen Byram was going to get traded. He ends up signing a 2-year, $12.5 million with the Sabres. The only downside to this is after those 2 years are over, he'll be a UFA. So it does give Buffalo some more time to figure things out. The big thing with Bowen Byram is that he wants to be the guy on a team. And right now he's not that, because obviously he's got defensive partners on Buffalo that are sort of taking the lead there. Rasmus Dahlin, most notably. So that's why, he's kind of looking for a bigger role there, but we'll see. Maybe he has a change of heart after those 2 years, but it's a very reasonable contract for Byram. There's been some injury concerns about him in terms of his career and him, the ability to stay healthy, but so far so good. That's been encouraging to see what he's been able to do, but something to keep an eye on. 24 years old, to be 26 when he gets to UFA, if he does get to UFA. And that's where things will get pretty interesting. There's some rumblings. The Canucks going to be circling on that contract when it's up. Byram obviously playing for the Vancouver Giants in the WHL. Is Quinn Hughes going to leave? If he does leave, maybe Byram's someone that they look at. So we'll see. Very interesting that Buffalo goes this route with Bowen Byram. They do avoid arbitration, though, by doing that. Looking at some other moves, Morgan Frost signing with the Flames. Again, Flames are someone to keep an eye on because there's two names that we've been hearing popping up in trade rumors. One being Nazim Kadri, who we'll talk, like I said, a little bit later here with Steven Ellis. The other one is Rasmus Andersson, who we know Vegas was interested in. Apparently Dallas is in the mix for him as well. So we'll see if there's a move there, but we know that Calgary is looking to sell some of their older assets. They're not really, I guess they're kind of rebuilding at this point, Calgary, right? So this is where they're going to have to make some decisions, but I imagine Anderson will be traded at some point. They'll find a deal, I think. Carolina Hurricanes, a bunch of moves there. Obviously, we talked about Ehlers, I think, last time on the show, signing that 6-year contract. Another guy that wanted a bigger role, so we'll see if Hurricanes are able to facilitate that, and see if that pays off. The one thing with Ehlers, not a ton of goals scored in his career, but is that a result of him not getting the playing time, or is it a result of he's maybe not skilled enough? We'll find out. But Carolina obviously making a bunch of moves. Obviously, the Condre Miller trade was one of the big moves that they made, signing an 8-year contract. They sort of feel like he can elevate his game with the Hurricanes. So yeah, a lot of moves there for Carolina. We'll see if those pay off. With Chicago, there was a bunch of other sort of moves that happened. Actually, Chicago hasn't really done a whole lot. I think they've kind of actually missed out on a lot there as well. Brent Burns signing with the Avalanche, that was a big move there. There's going to be bonuses in that too. I believe it was just a 1-year deal for $3 million. Or says financial terms not disclosed, but my understanding is it's laid in with bonuses. So we'll have to see how that sort of pans out. And obviously the Blue Jackets, we had Troy on here a little while ago. Ivan Provorov, I think, if you're looking at the free agent market and you're going, hey, is there a better option here than Ivan Provorov? Maybe paid a little bit more than they would have wanted, but Ivan Provorov is a serviceable defenseman, and maybe you got to pay a little bit more to keep a guy in there. But that was the theme of this offseason. A lot of teams opting to keep their players as opposed to, going the free agent route. We saw this with Vancouver, with Brock Besser. Provorov doing the same thing here with Columbus. We've seen other teams do similar things there. So be interesting to see if there's any more sort of movement there with some of the free agents, in coming years. I just think this year it kind of makes a little bit more sense. Let me just get this all teed up here for when Steven comes on. Again, if you guys have any questions, please let me know. Sorry, just trying to get this loaded up. And then, looking at some other moves here. Yeah, again, like Dallas, same thing, keeping Blackwell. They do end up trading Matt Dumba. That was a move that they made. So they ended up shipping him off. Detroit signing a couple veterans like James Van Riemsdyk, Bernard Docker as well. The Oilers made a couple moves as well. Curtis Lazar, Andrew Mangiapane, Evan Bouchard, obviously their big defenseman re-signing there. That's one interesting thing here with them kind of allocating their cap space to Bouchard. Is there going to be some other movement for the Oilers? They're going to run into some cap issues, I think, at some point. So, there's some rumblings that maybe Darnell Nurse is someone they look to unload at a certain point, but we'll see. And then the Oilers actually made some news this week. Actually wanted to bring this up. The coaching staff, they switched things up a little bit. If you look at it here, this is worth noting just because, again, this is a team that's been to the finals twice. So the moves they made, let me find these here. I need something more concise. This is just more Knobloch's reaction to it, but let me note actually, we got Steven Ellis on here nice and early, which is great. So going to welcome him back on, him from Daily Faceoff. He's been on the show before. One of my favorites, Steven Ellis, here on the program. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to bring him on. Steven, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Great. How's the floor hockey going, by the way? I love the videos. So you guys play right through the summer then? Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah. So we it's primarily kind of a summer sport. So go.
Oh, I got you now. You're good. Sorry, yeah, there was just a bit of a delay, but you're good now. Yeah, the summer league. You were telling me about it.
Yeah, primarily we play in the summer. I play 6 to 8 times a week. I played one game last night where I got hit hard in the head. So we had to do some concussion stuff afterwards, and I broke 2 of my toes earlier in the summer. So that also got re-broken last night, which was not fun. But other than that, it's a good sport, especially when it's like 32 degrees and there's no air conditioning and there's nothing kind of slowing us or keeping us from like not dying out there. Other than that, it's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Let's get into the hockey stuff. I'm just curious for you, do things slow down a lot at this time of year? I know we see a lot of the shows obviously going on summer vacation. I know for you guys, there's obviously off season and draft prep and, post draft and all that stuff. Is your schedule a little bit lighter, or is it still gung ho even in the summer?
So I'm doing a prospect series looking at every team's prospect pool throughout this summer. So it's kind of like pretty busy that way. And then we've also got, what else do we have coming up? We've got the Hlinka Gretzky, the under 18 tournament for the draft prospects. There's a U17 tournament, Plymouth, I'm going to go to as well. Got Canada's under 17 training camp. I'm going to be in the rink like 20 times before the season starts. So no, it does not slow down. Like it slows down to the fact that it's not games every night, but there's still a lot going on.
You said Plymouth, right? Plymouth, Massachusetts?
Plymouth, Michigan. So that's where home
Michigan.
was.
I was going to say, because I'm actually going to Plymouth, Massachusetts tomorrow, believe it or not. So when you said Plymouth, I thought, oh, maybe we're going to be in close quarters there. I'm going for a work event, but yeah.
Yeah, USA Hockey's based in Plymouth, Michigan. So it's cool. It's nice because it's like a 3.5-hour drive and lots of good pizza in the area too.
That's great. Let's get into some Toronto Maple Leaf stuff. We'll get into some draft stuff as well. But, one of the big things that's come out the last couple of days is this Nazim Kadri thing. Obviously, seems like he is available from the Flames. What's sort of your take on that? Because obviously there's some cap stuff that would have to go in. You'd have to move some things around. But what do you make of this Kadri thing potentially coming back? It's kind of something, I think when he left Toronto, I don't think people really thought he would come back.
I don't see it happening. He's kind of denied it pretty quickly too. Like he's got a contract that'd be tough to move, kind of by design, so he could stay in Calgary, and he would be a good fit for the Leafs because, like, the reality is they lost Mitch Marner and they didn't come close to getting better. Like they've done nothing kind of on the free agent market. Like Matthias Michelli was a nice pickup, but that's a guy who was a healthy scratch a lot in Utah over the last couple of years. So I'm not sure that's the answer there. So beyond that, I think you look at it and say, okay, well, Kadri would be a good fit, but like they've denied it. I've talked to people in Calgary that say like they don't see how it makes any sense for either team. So I don't think we're going to see that.
Well, I was wondering too, like, who would Calgary want? Like, people always look at the player that's available, but they never look at like what the other team would necessarily want. Like Toronto's prospect pool is a little bit bare. I know they have a few like Easton Cowan, they have certain, names in the system, but as far as I know, some of their picks, they don't really have the luxury of being able to trade those. And then if you look at roster players, like, I mean, I know they want to get rid of like Morgan Riley, but like that's not appealing to Calgary. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know. Like, I think that's the part too, where it's like, what would Calgary even want? And I guess I'll throw this to you as well. Like, are there players available right now you think could be moved that would be appealing to other teams?
The whole question for the last couple of years is like, is Nick Robertson going to be traded? And obviously, like right now he's an RFA with arbitration rights. So like, not exactly an easy guy to move at this point. And his trade value has got to be the worst it's probably ever been. So I don't know if he's available in that case. Beyond that, like we know the Leafs want to clear some cap space. Is it going to be someone like David Kampf? He's got a modified no trade clause for about 10 teams. He makes $2.4 million. So there's that. Kelly Yarncroc could be another one, but he missed most of last year. So again, what type of trade value does he have? So I think you're looking at this and saying, there's not a lot of trade options for this team. And they do have a bit of cap space to work with. They have $5.3 million. Like that's the most they've had in a long time. But you're still looking at this and like, first off, you're not getting them on the free agent market. And then if you're going the trade market, you're it's going to be a tough one to get good value without just taking on a contract that might not be a guy that you really want. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if they actually end up keeping Nicholas Waugh, who they got as part of that Mitch Marner trade. He's got a $3 million deal. Is he moved to bring in something else? I don't know, but they don't have a lot of trade pieces there. Brandon Carlo's been mentioned. He's a guy
they just acquired at the deadline, right?
They just got him, but he's a guy that you look at the blue line, like it's a solid blue line. You kind of want to keep him, don't you? So I don't know. It's a tough one.
We haven't talked since the Marner trade, and I know we had talked about this months ago about, what was going to end up happening, and I think we both kind of agreed that he wasn't going to be coming back. The Leafs were in a tough spot because it came out multiple reports that they did try and trade him at the deadline, but obviously Marner declining, obviously becoming a dad and different things. So the Leafs were kind of had their hands tied regardless. Was this kind of the best case scenario? At least they got something for Marner. You can't replace him fully, but they got something out of it. What was sort of your take on the way everything kind of unfolded with Mitch Marner?
Yeah, I think they knew unless they were getting someone like Nikolai Ehlers, they probably weren't going to get anybody in the free agent market worth spending a lot of money on. So at that point, you get a guy back and someone who could be your third line center, could play on the wing, and Nicholas Waugh, but you still look at this team and they're not going to be as good. Now, are they kind of saying, okay, this year we're not going to win again? Let's focus on next summer where there's going to be a lot of really high-end free agents. Now, I feel like we talk about that every year, like, oh, who are the free agents for next year? There's going to be this really exciting free agent crop, and it never ends up becoming that. Like, this doesn't seem to happen that way. So I think with the Leafs, they probably are just looking at this and saying, we want to keep that opportunity available to spend next year, but I don't see how it's going to be a good summer for them. Like Martin Netchus would be a nice pickup next year. But again, I don't know.
Well, there's also some baggage with him too. I think we kind of have to say that now. He had the issues in Carolina with the playing time. He goes to Colorado, which you think would be a great fit for him, and now he's already talking about, there's talk about him maybe wanting something different. And also one of the themes we saw this year with the offseason is teams just opting to keep players and not making it to free agency. We saw that, with Provorov in Columbus, the Canucks circling back on Brock Besser. Like, do you think that could potentially happen again next year, where you're kind of looking at the options and going, might be better just to overpay our own guys and not really take a risk and miss out? Because I think what's happened now, talk about the Leafs, I don't ever remember the Leafs having any cap space. Usually they're always capped out. Like a lot of teams have cap space, but there's nowhere to spend it at this point.
Yeah, like actually the good news for Toronto is like next year they don't have any really key free agents they got to worry about. Like Anthony Stolarz will be the big one there. I know they've got some goalies in the system that where if Joseph Woll looks really good, maybe you don't bring back Stolarz and you promote someone like a Dennis Hildeby or an Artur Akimov or even who knows if someone else shows up there. But you look at it, like Connor McDavid's probably going to sign in Edmonton. I know a lot of Leaf fans love that to happen. Just like don't see why he would do that. You look at Jack Eichel, Vegas, you'd think you want to keep him. Minnesota, I don't see how they would ever let Kaprizov go, guys like that. So there's going to be some really interesting players that will be on the free agent market in theory, but we expect most of those guys to sign, right, at a certain point here. So I'm not too worried. I think it's going to be kind of a similar situation where a lot of those best free agent options are just not going to be available next year.
Yeah, and we're hearing too that maybe McDavid doing a shorter term deal and maybe waiting to see where the cap goes, because obviously it went up pretty high this year, to maybe cash in even more. And I think there's also concern about, the goaltending and the fact that Edmonton wasn't able to really do anything. I know they got a new goalie coach, but it doesn't seem like they're going to get anyone new, between the pipes, and both Skinner and Pickard are going to be UFAs next year. Do you think, again, kind of switching over to Edmonton, like, do you think that that's going to be a factor in McDavid's decision, whether he stays long-term with, the direction of the Oilers?
Yeah, because like next year, like that's the thing. Getting a good goalie that you can feel confident in is so difficult. And you look at the goalies that we saw, like this year's market, there was nobody they were going to go out there and get really excited about. Then you look at for next year, it's something where Bobrovsky will be a free agent, but he'll be 38 years old. Like, how good is he going to be at that point? And so I think it's definitely an interesting situation with the Oilers. I can be one of their goalies. If they need a guy, I'll be ready to play. I've got like 6 or 7.
Got experience.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of Oilers jerseys. I can play. But I think with them, it's McDavid. Him and his family, they've spent a lot of money and investing in things in Edmonton. His wife just opened up a restaurant. Like there's certain things like that where like you can move and can change things, but I don't think he leaves. But I think that's still a team that should be a contender for a long time. I don't think goaltending is the only factor here. I think you look at Florida, their depth was better than Edmonton's depth. And I don't know if it really mattered who was in net for the playoffs. But yeah, Edmonton needs a goalie they can feel confident in. And I know John Gibson was a name that was kind of thrown around a lot. John Gibson was traded for very little to Detroit, and partly for a reason. He has not been consistent, and he's been dealing with injuries the last couple of years. He was not going to be the answer to the team. So finding that goalie they need is going to be much more difficult, and I don't know where they go from there because they've got some decent goalies in the system, in the pipeline, but nobody that's close to being an NHL goaltender. So yeah, that's the kind of the big question mark, that and filling out the depth.
Just back to the Leafs quickly as we sort of tie a bow on this. Are there any other moves that you think they're going to be making at this point? I mean, obviously, we talked about the fact that they didn't really replace Marner. There isn't really many options outside of a trade. And I'm just looking at the picks here. Again, no first round picks next year, 2027. They don't have a second or first next year. Do you think, like, is this going to basically be the opening night roster outside of a few little tweaks, or do you see them potentially making a trade? Because all I've been hearing for weeks is, there's going to be a big trade coming, and it just hasn't happened because I think teams are like, the puzzle doesn't fit, so to speak, in terms of trades.
Yeah, I believe nothing when it comes to Leaf trade rumors because they're involved in every trade rumor and every player is always up for trade. So it's like, for me, I'm looking at that and like a couple years ago it was Nylander, like points last year is Matthew Nyes, like John Tavares, like all these guys that have been in trade rumors. Like it's hard to actually believe, and it's hard to also fully consider a Mitch Marner thing because it technically was a trade, but it was a sign and trade. It was more to get that contract. So I think with Toronto, I expect this to be mostly the lineup. I know just the free agent market that's left, there's not much to be excited about. Like Jeff Skinner might have been an interesting target, but he was not going to get $3 million from Toronto, and he got $3 million from San Jose. So that's how that went.
That happens. What's up, Billy? Shout out to Billy in the chat. Switching gears a little bit, one of the things you do a great job with is prospects. We had the draft. I'll show people the list here in case you haven't seen it. Were there any surprises for you in the draft, or maybe any picks that you think were, maybe steals or anything that sort of stood out from this year's draft? I think for the most part, it was kind of what people expected, but kind of looking at, where certain players went, were there any things that stood out to you for the draft? Kind of just putting, kind of looking at it as a whole.
Obviously, you look at the Islanders and taking Matthew Schaefer, that was the right choice, but it was their picks at 16 and 17 that I think were more interesting, and that was Victor Eklund out of Sweden and Kashan Aitchison out of Barrie. And you put those two guys together, like Eklund was one of the best wingers in this draft, while Aitchison just wants to go out there and kill people. He's aggressive, he's tough, he's just a great guy who could just shut guys down, and he's going to be a fan favorite. So those were two really amazing pickups for the Islanders, for sure. I thought Pittsburgh getting Ben Kindell, Bill Zonin, and Will Horkoff were interesting, especially Zonin and Horkoff. Actually, I'd say maybe Kindell was actually more of the shocking one. I don't think anyone saw him going number 11. And we know they were interested in Jake O'Brien. Well, O'Brien was off the board. We know that Pittsburgh was interested in Aitchison. Well, he didn't fall down to the next pick. But what they got were a couple guys that were tough to play against. And Bill Zonin, just a ton of energy out there. He likes to push guys around. Will Horkoff, the son of Sean Horkoff, another one who loves to just get involved. He's got a good shot. And Ben Kindell's got this two-way game to him, and he's got a really good release, very dangerous around the net. So Pittsburgh picked some guys at spots I wouldn't have picked at, but I feel like you look at it, it's like I think they might get 3 NHL players out of that, and that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, and Pittsburgh obviously doing a bit of a rebuild. I'll talk about Pittsburgh in a sec, but as someone who watches the Canucks, Braden Coots out of Seattle, I'm hearing a lot of good things. What have you sort of seen from him? Good work rate, good leader. I'm hearing a lot of good things about this pick.
Yeah, like if I were Vancouver, I would have preferred Cole Rushne over him, but or Victor Eklund. But with Coots, you're getting a player who is committed to winning every shift, and not in a physical aggressive way, but he's going to go out there and try and outsmart you. He's going to force you to play on the outside. He's going to force you to make quick decisions because he'll make you pay with the way that he attacks you. So I thought that was still a solid pick for him. I think there's nothing super flashy in his game. Like he's not a top line player, but he's got that second, third line potential as a guy who can really outsmart players with the way that he attacks both with and without the puck. So I like him.
You mentioned Pittsburgh. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of eyes on the 2026 draft with Gavin McKenna. Of course, I talked about it earlier. Opting to go to Penn State with a nice contract there. There's all this talk about Pittsburgh getting McKenna, we had a trade this week too, which I think does impact Pittsburgh's season. Arthur Seelovs being traded from the Canucks to the Penguins. I guess they're going with Seelovs and Jari next year as their tandem. Again, I think they're Seelovs is a wild card. Like, he had 10 games last year for Vancouver. He fell out of favor with the organization. That's why, despite the Calder Cup playoffs and the success he had with them winning, and the playoff success he had the year before in the Nashville and Edmonton series with the Canucks, ultimately there just wasn't any room when they re-signed Demko and Kevin Lankinen. So kind of tying this to Pittsburgh a bit, I think there's a lot of expectation that Pittsburgh's going to be really bad. But my thing is, like, if their goaltending's okay, I mean, they weren't that bad last year. It wasn't great, but I don't think they're going to be like one of the worst teams in the league next year. What do you sort of forecast for Pittsburgh as they're one of the few sellers this year?
As long as you have Crosby and Malkin in the lineup, you're not going to come last. That's for sure.
Yeah.
At the very least, that's going to give you a bit of a buffer there. And that's a team that I feel like when Kyle Dubas took over, there was definitely some questionable decisions. I think everyone looked at the Erik Karlsson trade, even when he won the Norris. It's like, ooh, that's still a lot to take on here, and he hasn't played that good. We'll see if they could trade him. That will obviously make the team worse, but it'll clear up even more cap space to be aggressive. And I think that I don't fully expect the goalie combination of Jari and Seelovs to be the two goalies that are there on day one. I would still got to imagine that they want to get rid of Tristan Jarry in some fashion here. He's got a big cap hit. He was terrible throughout most of the season. And I know they really seem to like Joel Blunkfist, who's another goalie who probably looked like was going to be the backup goalie up until they brought in Seelovs. And I could argue that either of them could be the backup. It could come down to, like, I think the one issue here of Seelovs is he's not waivers exempt, while Blomqvist is, but I think Blomqvist could be the better goalie. So we'll see. So it's definitely an interesting situation for Pittsburgh, but I don't think they're going to come last. They're not going to make the playoffs. They just don't have a good group overall. It is what it is, but they've got some decent young prospects, but it's still not a great pipeline either.
No, and that Jari contract, by the way, was the Dubas move as well. So it didn't, kind of went all in on Jari, and it hasn't really panned out. And I think I've told this story before. I've told it plenty of times. I don't know if I told it to you, but Tristan Jari's from where I live here in Vancouver, and his parents have a grocery store, and it's called Jari's. So there's all this Tristan Jari stuff up there, and everyone's kind of rooting for him, but it hasn't gone well. So hopefully it can pan out. I mentioned the Seelovs trade. I got into a bit of a disagreement with my boss here, Taylor, who I do the show for here on Fanatics View. He talked about the Canucks getting fleeced, and I don't know what your view is on this, but like, I think a lot of people don't realize that like success in the AHL does not necessarily increase value. Like, there's been plenty of goalies that have had good success in the AHL, and again, credit to Seelovs for the performance he had in 23-24 in the playoffs with the Canucks as well. But like, them getting a 4th round pick, I think, was best case scenario. If you look at, comparables, Caden Primo getting traded for like a 7th round pick. You had the goaltender that went to Florida from Columbus. What's his name? I'm drawing a blank right now, but same thing. Like, they didn't get a lot of value. Yeah, exactly. So like, I just think that like, you can't, goalies like that, especially who was a sixth round pick, you're not going to get a lot of value for that, even though he won a Calder Cup. Do you view it the same way? Because I kind of look at, how goalies are valued at the AHL level. It just doesn't hold like a premium price tag with it.
Like, you can look at the thing about when it comes to AHL success is the teams that win are typically the older teams or a lot of experienced guys. And you look at it, and if you look at the top 10 scorers from Abbotsford's season, there might only be one guy that's got an NHL future, and it's Jonathan Lekkerimäki. And that alone, you look at that and say, okay, like, sure. But then you look at the goalies, and Seelovs was good, but like, at the same time, like, statistically, wasn't that much better than Nikita Tolopilo. And Ty Young looked decent too. So I think you look at that, and the goaltending was pretty solid across the board there for Abbotsford. So yeah, like, I think I was never super high on him, and I didn't put him high on any of my top goalie prospect lists. And I know some Canucks fans were like, really? Seriously? But to me, talking to guys around the league, like, a lot of people kind of view him as a backup at best, but maybe a third goalie, and a guy that the whole reason about being worried about him being waiver exempt or not being waiver exempt is because he was going to be put on waivers. Like, he was not going to be one of those two goalies next year for Vancouver. So I think this gives him a better shot to play. So that gives him a bit of a service there. but you were never going to get a lot of value for him. That's just the reality. Yeah. Like, I don't think he's that great of a goalie. And yeah, he had those great runs in the playoffs, but we've seen that happen time and time again where these goalies come out of nowhere, look great in the playoffs, but they can't do that again in the regular season. And you look at Seeloffs, and he just did not look consistent in the NHL in the regular season. So to me, I think it's more of a just give him an opportunity to play. Yeah, Stillman's not great, but you weren't going to get much. You weren't getting a second round pick for him, that's for sure.
No, and that's the literal argument I had. He's like, you guys could have got a second round pick. I'm like, John Gibson got a second round pick. Like, I can understand him getting a second round pick because he has NHL experience and he's looked good. Seelov's, unfortunately, with 10 games, they couldn't trust him, and that's why he went to the minors. And also, and I'm gonna have Dave Hall on next week to talk about the Abbotsford situation. But like, there was points when Tolopilo was actually playing over Seelov's in the minors last year. It was only in the playoffs when Seelov's went on his heater. So we'll see. The one thing with Seelov's, though, that I think is, a good bet from Pittsburgh, he plays well in high pressure situations. The playoffs from a couple years ago, won the World Championship with Latvia. That will be, if Pittsburgh does get in that type of situation, I think it could be beneficial, but I still have some question marks on Seelov's and what he can do there. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. We got a question here from Billy, who's a St. Louis Blues fan. He says, thoughts on Suter joining the Blues? I don't think I've been on a hockey show since they got them. So I'll give my take and then I want to get your take after. So a lot of Canucks fans are upset. Why didn't you re-sign Suter? And I think part of when they got Evander Kane, like, you basically capped yourself out. There's a lot of questions as to why they did that and all that. But and yes, the Canucks need a center. But if you look in the actual nitty gritty stats of Suter, he was playing above his head, so to speak. Like, if you look at the stats, the shooting percentage, he was playing out of this world. Is that something sustainable? Probably not. So I think the contract's fine. I think it's a great bet by the Blues. The 2 year, what was it? 2 years, $4 million per season. I think that's a fine move. They also got Butstad as well, which I think is going to help down the middle too. I just think for the Canucks that, like, you can't just run the exact same team back next year and expect different results. I know there were injuries and obviously the locker room rift, but I don't mind having Kane there, who brings a bit of an edge, who one of the big issues last year was the Canucks didn't really have any grit. Like, they just, Quinn Hughes would get, bumped around and there was no response. Evander Kane will do that. P.O. Suter won't do that, but Suter, again, is one of those Swiss Army knives where you can put him as center, winger, whatever. I like the move for the Blues. I think it's a good bet for them. What do you think?
Yeah, I think for the Canucks, like, you don't want to overpay for a guy that kind of had a breakout season at 29 years old, right? Like, that's something where you look at that and say, okay, like, as much as I like Suter and I thought he was a really good pickup at the Blackhawks when they got him a couple years ago, like, he probably played a little bit more than he probably should have this past year, and he played great, like, no question about it. 25 goals, almost 50 points. Like, it was a hugely successful season. But it's contracts like that could be a tough one, where if he doesn't hit that number again, it's going to look a little ugly. But for St. Louis, he'll get a lot of ice time still, and we don't expect the Blues to be a playoff team anytime soon. Vancouver, they want to kind of make up for what we just saw this past year, and they've got some good talent. We'll see kind of what happens there. But yeah, Suter, I don't feel like it's too massive of a loss. Yeah, he made the team better for sure, but I don't think we're going to see a guy who's getting 46, 50 points going forward. Like, I think 35 points next year makes sense.
Yeah, I'm curious to see some teams next year. Obviously, we know who made the playoffs last year in the West, but, St. Louis is one of those teams. I hate to break your bubble here, Billy, but I think, they had that great win streak, and that's what got them into the playoffs and a lot of success there. Is that something sustainable for this year? I don't know. I kind of look at this roster and I go, yeah, bubble playoff team, but I think there's a lot of bubble playoff teams. So I don't know. I don't think it's a guarantee that St. Louis makes the playoffs next year. It reminds me a bit of Nashville and what happened, where Nashville, remember the year before, they went on that great heater, got in the playoffs, they lost to Vancouver, and then you'd think they're going to be better with getting Marchessault and Stamkos, and they ended up being one of the worst teams in the league last year. I don't think St. Louis will be that, but I think they're one of those teams. If I had to mark a team that could potentially be on the outside looking in, St. Louis kind of screams to me that, just with the fact that I think there's some holes here on this team. What do you think?
Especially with the fact that, like, Jordan Kyrou's name's been mentioned in a lot of trade rooms.
Right.
Like, that's a tough guy to fill, and we don't expect Braden Shen to be as good anymore. And you look at that blue line, and you like Parenko, you like Cam Fowler, Falk, Broberg, Logan Mayhew's a rookie, so that's going to be tough there. And can Bennington continue to hold his own there? And obviously Joel Hofer's been a name to watch in trade rumors too. So it's still a team that, like, I like some of their guys coming up in the pipeline, but I think they're still like a year or two away from being a bit more serious. So I look at this and say, yeah, not that they're not. I'm not convinced they're a playoff team, even with P.O. Suter.
Just taking a look at the overall offseason so far, are there any teams that really you're impressed with some of the moves they've made? Obviously, the Hurricanes did a bunch of moves. They got Ehlers, they got the trade for Keandre Miller, which I think is a decent bet there. And then you've got other teams like people have been criticizing the Kings and some of the moves that Ken Holland has made on the back end, which I agree with people. I think that wasn't the right way to go with their defensive core. We'll start first with sort of the winners. Who were some of the teams you think really did well this offseason with some of their work?
Well, it's one team I think that's been the winner, and it's a team that hasn't really done anything on the free agent front, actually. It's the Montreal Canadiens going out there and getting Noah Dobson. I don't think Dobson's going to be as good as maybe he was 2 years ago. I think the pressure will be pretty interesting here, but I still think it's a guy that is going to give that team exactly what they needed on the back end, and that's good. I also like that he's going to be number 53, pretty random number for in the NHL. So always like seeing that. They're going to get a full season of Ivan Demidov. Temper expectations, but we still think he'll be in the Calder Trophy hunt there for sure. I think getting Joe Veleno, as rough of a few years he's had, I still think that's a guy that could be a depth forward and maybe someone who makes the team a bit harder to play against. We'll see. If Kirby Dach's healthy, that's a big deal. Zachary Bolduc's another player I really like. Can play center. He can play the wing. He's a tough guy to play against. So there's that. And I think that you look at how just the moves that Montreal made, I like that. Then on the flip side, you look at the LA Kings, and they got slower. They're not more skilled. They're not looking like I just don't know what they were doing this summer. And yet they announced all the deals, and it's like, guys, you guys made a mistake here way too quickly here. So Cody Ceci can be hot, but mostly cold. Brian Dumoulin, 3 years. Interesting choice there. That's not a team that's gotten better this summer. And given how many times they're in the playoffs every year and they're always kind of making some noise, hey, they're going to make the Cup final. Corey Perry's on the team. We know that's going to happen there. Yeah. They're going to make the Cup final, but I don't really know what the LA Kings were doing this summer.
I also worry about the goaltending. You got two goalies over 30. Anton Forsberg, I don't know if he's really the answer as a backup there. And again, Kopitar is going to be a step slower this year. He's 37. You got Doughty, who's 35. Yeah, Ken Holland, man, it's, I know he was good years ago. I just think some of his moves that he's made, I don't think that was the way to go. In terms of, because we saw this last year with certain teams where they try and go big on the back end, but you need speed as well. You need guys that can move the puck, and I just think you're exactly right. I think this is a team that I think could regress a little bit. Although I did like the Andrei Kuzmenko signing. I think he's fit well there, but just wait till he doesn't play any defense, and then the Kings are looking to trade him again. So, or a team will look to trade him.
I have a hard time trusting Kuzmenko because
he fell out of favor very quickly with Rick Tocchet in Vancouver. So
the highs are high, but the lows are very low, and it's like figuring out the balance is tough.
Yeah. One other team I wanted to mention here, Winnipeg. They're only big. They lost Ehlers, but they did bring in Jonathan Taves. Like, what are you expecting out of Taves with being away for so long? I don't know. Like, I don't even really know what to expect. You got him on the $2 million contract. Obviously, there's bonuses laid into that. But is it any sort of impact other than just a feel good story about a hometown guy playing for the Jets?
Like, he wasn't good in the last couple of years of his NHL career in Chicago. So I don't know how taking all this time away coming back is going to be any better. Hey, good story. I truly didn't think we'd ever see him back in the NHL again, but he has to go play for the hometown team, a team that is going to regress, I think, too.
Yeah.
I think we've been talking about that for a couple of years, and they continue to prove people wrong. But now you lost Nikolai Ehlers. So where are those goals going to come from? That's like Gustav Nyquist is not going to do that. You need Cole Perfetti to pick it up. I don't exactly feel like Jonathan Taves is going to make a huge difference there. So yeah, they're not a better team. And getting Taves there is interesting, I guess. But I guess we'll kind of see what happens there. He wanted to be on a contending team. I wouldn't be surprised if by like middle December, he's like, you know what? I gave it a try. I'm not ready to keep playing anymore. Call it quits.
I kind of feel the same way. I do. Like, I just think like it is such a tall task, especially with this team too. Like, they've had a lot of success. Like, he might be a step behind, and they might just say like, look, we can't use you at this point because we need guys that can contribute here. And I could see that being an issue as well. The other thing I look at here is the goaltending. And, we saw this 2 years in a row, basically. and then you add in the Four Nations, Hellebuck, they keep overplaying him. And, I wonder, one of the things, and I hate to keep bringing this back to Vancouver, but, a lot of people were upset that they re-signed Demko and they do the Lankinen thing. I actually like that move for the simple fact that if you're getting a healthy Demko and you're not having to rely on him to have the workload, and you've got Kevin Lankinen who's capable. Lankinen will never be Demko, right? Like, he is a capable goaltender, though. Did quite well last year. I could see some regression this year for Lankinen, but I like the fact that Vancouver has two goalies that they can kind of balance the time a little bit. I don't think Eric Comrie is getting a lot of starts next year. Do you think there's a bit of a miss there from Winnipeg, maybe not addressing the backup goaltending position? Because as great as Hellebuck's been, he seems to always run out of steam come playoff time.
Yeah, like Comrie had a nice bounce back season this past year. Yeah. Like he's very hot and cold. He's played his best hockey by far in Winnipeg. But you look at the teams he's played for otherwise, and like Detroit and Buffalo. Okay, well, he had no support. So I think, for him, I do like that he's got an opportunity, I think, to give him 25 games. Even the 5 games down the stretch could go a long way. But like, if you need to switch to him in the playoffs because Hellebuck again falls asleep, like, you want this guy to be ready to go. So I'm not like, Comrie as a backup is fine. He's shown that he actually looked pretty decent in the bit of relief play he had in the playoffs. He can do a good job, but you got to give him an opportunity here. He's never played more than 20 games in an NHL season.
Yeah, and I just think they got to manage the load better. Remember, they had that big win streak last year. It's like, why not split it up a little bit, and try and get Comrie some more games? Because again, and then you had the Four Nations as well with Hellebuck. Like, that's a lot of that's a big workload for a goaltender. So I just wonder if they don't want to be keep making the same mistake. Okay, before we get out of here, I do want to ask you about Vegas. We talked about the Mitch Marner trade. The thing I look at here that's kind of interesting. I don't know why it's asking me to do verification. It'll come up here in a second. I look at, Pietrangelo, obviously it looks like his career might be done. And then the goaltending, I wonder with too, you're going with Schmid. I know there's some potential there with him. But Adin Hill, I don't think he was amazing last year. Is there, everyone's talking about how great the forward group is, and there's no disputing that, but I do look at this defense, looking a little average. And then you've got obviously the goaltending as well too. Do you look at that as well? Or am I out to lunch here about the defense and the goaltending here with Vegas?
Look, I think they got a legit shot at contending for the cup because they get a lot out of some of their depth guys. Like, their blue line might not look great, but like Jeremy Lauzon can go out there and block a ton of shots. And White Cloud, I think, has always been a good value pick. So I think you look at it and say, not the greatest blue line, definitely nowhere like they were a couple years ago when they won the cup. They probably could go out there and add another guy. I don't love Akira Schmid, and Adin Hill is a little too hot and cold, but Hill doesn't have anyone to push him this year, and that's going to be interesting because it felt like with Samsonov there was always the concern that he was maybe going to lose that gig. I wonder, Samsonov hasn't signed right yet at this point.
No, he hasn't. And there's a number of goaltenders, like Gorgiev hasn't signed either. I wonder, are we going to see, I imagine, and this happens every year, once the season starts and there's teams that have to figure out their goaltending, we're going to probably see some goaltending movement, I would think, at the start of the season. My guess is Akira Schmid's not the backup starting in the NHL next year. So we'll see what kind of happens there. But with Hill, it's the highs are high again. The lows are low. It's can you measure that to be a bit more impactful? We'll see. So I think Vegas is still going to be one of the better teams in the West. I think they just got so much going for them up front that they might be able to outscore their issues. But they got to stay healthy. They got to find out who they're going to put on LTR around the trade deadline. And they got to figure out maybe who the legitimate backup goalie is going to be. Yeah, that's just one thing I look at, because everyone's, and I don't blame them. This depth looks like a Florida depth as far as the forward group. It looks great. There's really no weaknesses. You look at their entire lineup, it looks awesome. I just wonder, missing Pietrangelo, all those minutes he chewed up. Hanifin and Theodore are great. McNabb and White Cloud too. I wonder with that and the goaltending, could that be an Achilles heel of Vegas? Because obviously expectations are high with them signing Mitch Marner. Steven, this was awesome. Always appreciate you coming on here, giving some insight. Like you said, you got a lot of stuff coming up. So anything you got coming up on Daily Face-Off or anything else you got going on that you want to let us know about, I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, so follow me on social media at mostly Twitter, SLS Hockey. I'm also on Blue Sky if you're one of the 10 people who are on that, StevenPLS.ca. And then I'll be doing prospect profiles every single day until the 32nd team, which I think is August 17th. And lots of prospect coverage coming up of all the tournaments. So I'm looking forward to it.
Good stuff. Stay on the IR a little bit. Got to make sure your feet are working for floor hockey. You got to get those toes checked out, man.
Oh, I got to play tonight. So let's see how it goes.
Playing hurt. I love it. Okay, Steven, take care, man. We'll talk closer to season time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much.
There you go. Steven Ellis, one of the best in the business. You can, the great thing about having Steven on is we can talk about we can talk about obviously the NHL news. We can talk about the Leafs. He's based, just outside of Toronto, and the draft stuff, which is really good. So really good insight there from Steven. Always like getting people on here who are way smarter than I am when it comes to breaking down hockey. If you guys got any questions, continue. We'll do maybe another 5-10 minutes here. Just whatever is on your mind in terms of some of the signings there. So that's interesting about Vegas. I see a lot of people talking about, and I like Vegas. Like I'm not one of these people, there's a lot of people out there that are anti-Vegas, the expansion, and they cheated with the cap and all that. I admire Vegas for making some of the moves they've made. They take a lot of risks. They figure it out. They've won a cup. I like all that, and they're fun to watch. So I hope Vegas does well, even as someone who, watch the Canucks a lot. It would be nice to see the Canucks get over the hump here, but I do enjoy watching Vegas play, and I hope they figured it out. I think, we're romanticizing a little bit too much about the Marner thing and not looking at maybe the stuff on the back end. One of the things I should mention, I didn't talk to Steven about, is if Vegas is able to get Rasmus Andersson, then they're going to be fine, because, that's sort of a decent replacement there for Pietrangelo. So that's sort of something to keep in mind. But again, I do worry a bit about the goaltending situation, and we'll see if there's anyone available that they get at the start of the season. So that's where we're at now. Keep the questions coming, everyone. Really appreciate it. Just looking at some more free agent moves. We'll go through the rest of this list, and if we don't have any questions, we'll kind of wrap things up here. The Islanders, we're talking about goaltending. David Rittich, who was with the Kings, I believe, last season, signs with the Islanders. Tony Giangelo as well. Jonathan Drouin signing with the Islanders. Islanders are actually an interesting team. Don't know if they're playoff bound, but they obviously traded Noah Dobson and made some big moves in the offseason. They got a little bit of cap space, but you look at this roster right now, I mean, they have something that a lot of teams want right now. They have a first-line center and a second-line center, and that's something a lot of teams are looking for, that second-line center. So they got their defense and the goaltending, obviously a position of strength for them. They got David Rittich and Sorokin. That's a pretty good tandem. I think the tandem idea is very underrated by a lot of people out there in terms of, having two goalies that are capable. Some other moves here. The Rangers, Gavrikov, obviously we talked about that with Troy a couple weeks ago. We'll see if those moves end up paying off. It's funny because, I mentioned Keandre Miller. A lot of Rangers fans are like, yeah, enjoy Keandre Miller because it's not going to go so well. Maybe it won't. I don't know. I think Carolina is a good team to kind of like rebuild players and get the best of them. But a lot of Rangers fans are convinced he is not the real deal. So we'll see how that sort of pans out with Carolina. But, this is pretty much the same roster as last year. We'll see if they're able to repair that relationship with Terry Panarin. Maybe they try and trade him. They've got a lot of older guys locked up here. Look at the center wise. Like you got Panarin, who's 33, Zibanejad is 32, Miller's 32. Will Lafreniere have a better season? He's locked up for a bit. Maybe he's some trade bait here if things don't go well. I like the defensive pair though with Gavrikov and Adam Fox. It's certainly an upgrade there. And then you got Sorokin, so you're always going to win games with him. It's always a good move there. The Senators getting obviously resigning Nick Cousins, signing Lars Eller. A couple of good moves there. Dan Vladar going to the Flyers. Flyers making a few moves here. Getting Christian Dvorak as well. There's that relationship there with Rick Tocchet, with Dvorak playing in Arizona. Mentioned the Penguins making a bunch of moves, getting Arthur Seelovs. The Sharks were very busy. Jonathan Klingberg, Adam Gaudette, Dmitry Orlov, Jeff Skinner. That's a move I forgot to mention. Skinner doing a 1-year, $3 million contract there. Skinner was not in favor with the Oilers last year, so that made him kind of not someone they wanted to bring back. The Kraken, didn't do a whole lot this offseason. The Blues, who we mentioned there, Bustad, Suter. I like all the moves the Blues did. I just, again, I do wonder if they're a team maybe on the outside looking in. The Lightning didn't do a whole lot. Of course, they're kind of all locked up as it is. The Leafs, we talked about some of the moves there. Mammoth, signing Schmidt and McBain. Not any really big moves there. The Canucks, Besser, and then a couple of their RFAs they locked up there. And then we talked about Vegas re-signing a bunch of their players. And obviously the Capitals there too, bringing back Anthony Beauvillier. To cap things off, the Winnipeg Jets with a few signings here. Nyquist, Tanner Pearson. And so we'll see. Lots to talk about. Wanted to let you guys know before I wrap things up here today. The show's going to be a little bit later just because of my summer schedule. So I'll probably be going closer to 12:15 Eastern, going forward for the rest of the summer. And then once the regular season starts, we'll go back to the 12 p.m. time slot. But I'll be back doing my regular thing. I know it's been this last month. I've been away a couple weeks. I was away last week. I was away 2 weeks before that. So things will be back to normal here on the show, and we'll continue to get a variety of guests. I always like bringing on, and I'll try and get some different guests too. I know we've been kind of doing a rotation of certain guests. I do want to get Dave Hall back on to talk about the Abbotsford Canucks winning the Calder Cup and the Canucks moves this offseason. So I think Dave Hall will be on next week, but maybe after that we'll look at getting some more people on. But yeah, really appreciate you guys tuning in. If you guys have any questions or you missed or you're watching the replay of this, just let me know in the comments if there's anything you want answered. Hope you guys have a great rest of your Wednesday. I'll talk to you guys next week, and take care.